Well, you spoke about it, man, in one of your videos recently. The thing about Peterson saying it's the middle ground between order and chaos, and you get that a lot out here because you're keeping to your structure of back at home. You know, you're still trying to stay fit, you're still trying to stay focused, etc., on doing something important with your time. But you also have to be a little bit chaotic as well because you're in a new place. You have to actually humble yourself and say, you know what, I'm somewhere new now. I need to do something different. And that's what I've been doing. I've been like, you know what? I realized that actually I'm a bit uptight back at home. And well, I'm here now, so might as well just see what this place has to offer. And I don't mean, and you know what I mean by that. I don't mean like, you know, the stereotypical Thai tourism things. I mean more sort of on the spiritual side. But yeah, no, it's very important to loosen up a little bit, which you can do out here.
Mate, you've just answered one of my first questions I was going to ask you, Jerome. So I seen like you doing a video on how to like take life less seriously. And I think that in itself, when you go out and travel, because it takes you out of your habit and your routine. Like you're used to being in this structure and life becomes so monotonous, and that becomes serious because you get the playfulness taken away because you're not experiencing new things. So like how have you found it when you've been traveling, like trying to keep that structure but also experiencing new things? Like what have you done to anchor yourself? But like how are you pushing yourself out your comfort zone as well?
Well, that's the thing, man. I'm pushing myself out of my comfort zone by staying in hostels a fair bit because in hostels they're not very comfortable. Contrary to a lot of self-improvement advice, which tells you need to be treating yourself like a celebrity so you become a celebrity, I argue that you need to actually put yourself in rough situations because then you know yourself better. And so if you stay in hostels when you're traveling, you meet people who are on the same journey, more or less, as you, or you can meet people who are on the same journey as you. And so that allows you to sort of loosen up because you know you're not the only person on this journey, so to speak. And yes, just staying in hostels, explore the area, that sort of thing. Don't just stay in your hotel room the entire time. I'm actually in a hotel today because I'm doing this recording with you. I needed some privacy, but after today, I'm back on the hostel. So it's the best way of living out here, I found.
I think with the hostels as well, it forces you to talk to people. I remember when I was traveling, I was staying in hostels. Like normally, I'm one of them people that in the morning I just meditate, I go and do my own thing, and I don't want to speak to people. But you wake up and you've instantly got people there, and you're forced to communicate. You're forced to go and do things with people, and it's like putting yourself in that position to have to communicate. Because if you're like me, or I don't know about you, Jerome, but I kind of try to stay away from social situations, and I'm naturally introverted. So to put yourself in that situation where you're constantly exposed to new conversations, new cultures, new people, it forces you to grow. Like you're putting yourself out of your comfort zone, like purposefully, instead of letting it just happen to you.
Well, that's the thing. We talk about flow state quite a lot. And when you're in a hostel, oddly enough, your problems and the anxiety you always have in conversation when often you're back at home, you know, am I sounding intelligent enough? Am I sounding decent? Am I interesting, etc.? It all goes out the window because you're all in the same boat. And I've found that you can get into this sort of flow state of conversation very easy in a hostel because in the end of the day, you're probably not going to see these people again. So you just have to enjoy the time that you are with them. And you just, hey, how was last night? Oh, I saw what you got up to last night. You were a silly one, you know what I mean? And many people say this is pointless conversation, but I don't think it is. I think it grows you as a person because it makes you realize that you don't have to take things seriously all the time. That sometimes it is just beneficial just to not be serious. And just, you know what? We all have our dreams and aspirations and our serious things that we aspire to be. But they can take a break a little bit. In the end of the day, you're just a traveler. You're just one of them, and you have a message to share with them. And that should be the important thing. And often it's not the message itself, it's the vibe that you present. And if you present yourself as a confident, be at the same time laid back individual, I think that's the most powerful thing you can do.
For sure. Self-improvement does this really weird thing, especially if you get stuck in like the content bubble of watching like Hamza and watching like Andrew Tate and that, where it like kind of cultivates part of your ego that you think you're better than the people who aren't doing self-improvement. And I think you kind of like get this lens, this dirty lens where you don't perceive people as they are. And you start thinking, oh, they're just normies. They're not doing what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And it takes the fun away from life.
Lens, man. It's a really dirty lens. It's interesting. It's good you mentioned the whole self-improvement thing again, man. Like, I would argue this is self-improvement. It's self-improvement on the spiritual side, which is, yeah, I know that sounds very very metaphysical and a bit hippie of myself, but it really is self-improvement on a spiritual level, because I feel often what's talked about in self-improvement is obviously is mental, it's physical, etc. Or meditate, go to the gym, but I feel that's kind of surface level, and you need that spiritual side. You actually need to work out who you are first, and the best way of doing that is by exposing yourself to these situations, and that's kind of forgotten about. You don't see really any big influencer telling you to do this. In fact, they tell you to do the opposite. They tell you you need to be on your grind 24/7. You need to be working 8 hours a day, then go gym, then sleep, then wake up and rest and repeat. Whereas I say you need to do that a bit, but you also you need to relax, because that's what's killing you mentally, and it's what's killing your soul essentially, is that you're not playful anymore. You've devoted so much of your time to the grind that now you're sort of you can't even smile at somebody anymore, because you're thinking, oh, I'm wasting my time. I should be reading a book right now. When in reality, you are learning from other people through the art of talking to people. And even if it's just simple things like, where are you from? What do you do? Geez, you learn so much about people. Like, I tell you, I've learned so much about different countries from being out here. You know, I've oddly enough, I'm English. I only, as you know, we're both English. I only speak one language fluently, which is English. But I tell you something, through speaking to people, hell, my other languages have improved massively. Like, from just speaking to Russian people here in Phuket, like, I can say stuff like, "Привет, меня зовут Jerome, как дела?" And that means, hello, my name is Jerome, how are you? And it's like, I've learned that just in the last couple of days. And it's like, you are improving. You are, it's just not spoken about in the general self-improvement community, the importance of just relaxing. Contrary to how it sounds, you need to take a step back.
Yeah, that what we was mentioned before, the border between order and chaos.
Yeah.
That's when the Taoists say the yin and the yang. That's what's represented, and the same can be for self-improvement. Like, you need your structure, you need to like be disciplined in certain things. But if you're just constantly that, and you're never letting yourself play, and you're never letting yourself explore and interact with humans, there comes a certain amount of self-shame when you're not being disciplined, and you stop beating yourself up for things. So if you wake up and you meditate, you read, you get some work done, but then you don't sit there all day on your laptop, you create and cultivate this idea that that's something to be ashamed of, and then that keeps you still, and you get in this self-hate like cycle of just beating yourself up, and it takes the fun away from life. It literally rips you away from what is the essence of life in front of us, and life's meant to be enjoyed. If you can't enjoy life, what are you working for? And It's just trying to switch that mindset to stop beating yourself up so much, stop analyzing everything.
And it's not even enjoyment in like a hedonistic way. It's not enjoyment in terms of like you're enjoying superficial things. You're enjoying simple, real things. I think that's the important thing. It's the reality. You have to enjoy reality. You have to enjoy what is in front of you. And I feel you need to do that. You need to go and ask yourself some serious, deep questions. You need to ask yourself, who am I? What am I good at? And what is my purpose in this world? And I feel a lot of people on self-improvement haven't done that. They haven't asked themselves these tricky questions, and instead they look to an individual above them. They look at like a mentor or an icon, and they think, you know what, I'm just going to follow that person and do exactly what they do, and I'll be in their same boat. When in reality, you won't be. You'll be imitating somebody else.
Yeah, this is when you fall into ideologies and you fall into traps of believing in things that you don't even believe. And you get so far away from your own truth because you're trying to live an ideal. You're trying to like manipulate and like be someone else, that you kind of lose who you are in the process. And then you'll get 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line, you'll look yourself in the mirror and think, who am I? Like, what have I done? I've just spent my whole life climbing up the wrong ladder. So it's important to like allow your vulnerability to come through and like be your authentic truth. And that's hard to do, Jerome. It's not an easy thing to do. It's not an easy thing to follow the things that you know are right. It's not an easy thing to act in accordance with how you want to act, because we've got all this societal pressure. We've got social media we're trying to portray ourselves in certain ways. There's a lot of pressure to act like someone else, but the more you can strip that back, and the more you can just like kind of like flow and just be who you are, you'll find your own path. It takes time, but you'll get there.
If you are a true, authentic representation of yourself, you will find your path. I think
Absolutely.
I think you summed it up brilliant there, mate. I really think you did. That's why I didn't really add to that much. But you just have to be authentic. You cannot imitate other people. You have to know yourself, and that's the tricky bit. Tricky bit is knowing yourself, because that's tough. Like no one teaches you who you are. You have to almost find that out through growing up and trial and error. But once you have a good idea of who you are, then you just follow that entirely, and you genuinely, okay, I'm this person. I am extroverted, let's say. I'm good at talking, but I'm not really how do we say, I'm a bit ADHD. I'm bad with technology. I can't work in that sort of traditional environment. So don't try and become a coder. You see what I mean? Don't try and do something that is against your life force. Like I messaged you a couple of days ago, mate, because I was very interested in the Alan Watts and the concept of Wu Wei. I made a brief video about it. Effortless action. You know, that is self-improvement in its truest sense. That's what people should be trying to strive towards. It's acting, it's doing things. It's not being lazy, but it's acting in a way which is in accordance to your life force, in accordance to your energy. And that is the purest, greatest sense of self-improvement, because you're not trying to be anybody else. You're being yourself, but you're acting in a way which is in complete, genuine honesty towards yourself.
It's paradoxical, though. It's paradoxical because like how much I get this stuck in my head now, and how much of it do you kind of have to act out an ideal to improve, though? Because like if I was like 19, 18, and when I was like drinking loads and doing a load of drugs, if I was just being my authentic self, and I think I just allowed my intuition to take over, I think I would have just leaned more into doing loads of drugs. So I'm not sure how much of it is like you kind of have to deposit an ideal and kind of act and then figure it out on the way. It's really paradoxical because you don't want to pretend you're someone else, but you do have to deposit like, I want to be here, and you kind of have to act like you are that person to get there. But it's really difficult because you can't just do that, because then you will forget the essence of yourself. I'm not sure if that makes sense, Jerome, but
no, it makes sense a lot, because I agree with you. Like I'm not preaching here at all being some sort of drunken degenerate who just parties all the time. It's not that at all. It's you still need that discipline 100%. Like you still need to like force yourself to do things that you don't want to. But part of that is forcing yourself to work out who you are. And I feel a lot of the times people who are drunks, people who are alcoholics, people who have severe issues in their own mind, like, you know, you spoke about when you were younger, you know, I was the same. You fall into these traps. You fall into these sort of binge drinking traps where you think, if I do this, I'll be accepted. But that's not you. That's not being authentic. That's, of course, if you go along with that, thinking that's who you are, then you're going to get into problems. But you need that, I don't know how you say it, man, but you need that period where you get thrown out into the woods, so to speak. You know, you need that period where you don't know who you are, and so you need to find who you are. That makes sense. And then once you do that, then that's when you follow that entirely. I'm not sure. I didn't say that in the best way, but I think you understood what you mean. You need that period where,
yeah,
you need,
for sure, Jerome. And
you need that period in the wilderness. You know? You need the period in the wilderness of your life. You know, and that's what travel in its purest sense should be. It's you discovering things.
Yeah, it's getting the feedback from the world. So like when you go out there, and like you can sit in your head all day and like abstract ideas. You can get stuck in like mirrors, just reflecting an idea there, which reflects an idea there, and you can't think your way out of a problem. But when you go out and act, and you lead with action, and you go out and explore, you get feedback from the world, which helps you interpret who you are as a person. So that's kind of is breaking down the barriers of who you think you are, because you go out and you speak to this person, and this person maybe says this to you, and then you figure out you don't like this person, or you like that person, and you like this place. You act in this situation, and through action you find out who you are, because you're putting yourself in uncomfortable situations, which shows you how you actually operate. And we're so complex. Like the mind is like the most complex piece of kit that has ever existed in the whole of the fucking universe. And so for us to try and sit there and just like abstract our way out of it, it just doesn't work. You
It
need
doesn't
to.
work.
It
Thank you,
doesn't
man.
work.
Yeah. It doesn't. You need to act. You need to actually put yourself in situations, not just talk about putting yourself in situations. You know, I think that was an issue which I fell into a lot when I was younger, was constantly dreaming all the time. Dreaming now, oh, you know, in a few years' time, I'll be that. In a few years' time, I'll be that. But not actually doing anything to actually progress you in that situation, because it's all in the head. But once you stop living in your head and start, you know, and that's not just dreams, that's anxiety as well. You just have to turn this off just for a second, or not for a second, but you just need to turn your brain off sometimes. And as crazy as that might sound, your brain is the best thing and worst thing in your body. Like, it will constantly be telling you, you're not this, you're not that. But it would also, well, it's also your brain. It's who you are as well. So it's just about controlling when to listen to these internal thoughts or not.
Yeah, and it's also not, there's not really a differentiation between the external and the internal. So, like, we seem to think that we project reality from our internal sense, but, like, really consciousness is just this universal force that's happening. And it's all around us, and we're tapping into consciousness, and we've just got this identification with a sense of self that makes us think we're separate. So we get stuck behind. We think we're this person behind our eyes, behind our face, and we're looking out, projecting the world. But if you look at like the neuroscience of the brain, or if you really like meditate and look for who is looking, try and look for the person that is in your mind. It doesn't exist. There is no locus of consciousness in your mind. It's just consciousness. So the external is the same as the internal.
So, from what you're saying is, are you saying you in the mind doesn't truly exist? It's only you in the body, and your mind is just consciousness.
Yes, everything's consciousness. The idea that this is what the Buddhists are saying as well, like the idea that we're this sense of self and we are someone who's observing reality, this separate nature from like the oneness of what's going on, that is an illusion in itself. Really, we are just consciousness. Somehow we have developed an ego through like an evolutionary purpose, because like you need an ego to survive. You need an ego to like have this identification of, I'm Jerome, I need to go out, I need to go and feed myself, I need to go and make money. That is your human ego, but that's not you. You are this conscious observer behind the ego. And our whole problem, all these like emotional issues that arise, like anxiety, depression, all of that arises from us identifying with this sense of self. And the more you can strip that back, the more you can layer away from the identification with all these emotions, the easier life becomes, because you kind of are just consciousness. You let just the flow of reality just come through you.
But you don't want to lose yourself in the process, though. That's the thing. Like, I get entirely what you're saying, and that's sort of what I've been doing, is sort of just letting go of these anxieties and the ego. But you can't do it in a way where you lose who you truly are in the process. Like, the ego, everyone talks about it slightly negatively in the self-improvement world. You know, the ego is kind of holding you back, but the ego sort of is you. It's part of you. It's your dreams and ambitions. It's the path you want to forge in the world. And I'm very careful about fully letting go in that sense. I don't want to lose who I am.
Yeah, for sure. And that's what Carl Jung was saying.
Yeah.
Like, you can go down this path and you can not form a proper ego. And that causes you to feel disconnected in the world, because we still got to live in reality. Like, we still got to live in this world. And to live in this world, you need to be a person. You need to have an ego. So you are your person, but it's just making sure that you fully understand that you are not that ego, because the more you identify with that ego, the more then you create the narrative around, I am that anxiety. So say you go to a social situation and you like go to speak to a woman. If you're fully identified with the part of you that's the ego, then you get anxiety and you have the narrative that I am that anxiety. But if you realize that anxiety is just experience, you can go, I'm experiencing anxiety. Anxiety is happening. It takes away the identification with it. It's not you. So then you haven't got a narrative around it being a bad thing or a good thing. It's just something that is being experienced in consciousness.
Yeah, and if you do that, as you've talked about, if you do that completely and you sort of disassociate away from the anxiety of who you are in those social situations, you come across as a far more charismatic and far more interesting and entertaining person, because the person you're speaking to can tell you're not living in your own head. You're not constantly analyzing every single conversation that's being said. You are going with the flow. Like, I'm talking to you right now, and I'm in that sort of state right now. I'm not thinking, is Alex right now judging me? And you're not thinking, is Jerome right now judging me? But I tell you, in a lot of conversations you have with people, at least back in the day, I used to think like that completely. I used to think, does this person like what I'm saying? And that is what's holding you back. So you do need to disassociate in that sense.
It's so hard to do though, because even
Yeah.
when I'm talking, so I went on this massive rant about the ego before, and then as I'm talking, I've got this like observer behind going, "You're not making sense. What are you talking about?"
Yeah.
And it always pops up. But the greater you've got the ability to realize that that's not you, and just to keep letting yourself happen, like let the conversation happen, let the flow of words happen, step out your own way, you'll find that you're more cohesive than you are if you're trying to abstract your way into like coming up with ideas. It's that
Exactly.
forcing things. The more you try and force things, like the further you get.
Yeah, exactly. It's not forcing things. But it's interesting you mentioned that voice in the back of your head. Have you seen that picture online? It's been around for a few years now. I can't exactly remember what it's called, but it shows like, who are you? It shows the human body, and then within the human body, there's like you controlling it, or are you just you? If you get what I mean. Like, how do you navigate through life? Is it you are yourself piloting this vehicle that is yourself, or are you just you? If that makes sense. Like, is there like how strong is this internal voice behind you?
Yeah, it's tough, Jerome, because you can also look at. Have you read into Joe Dispenza?
No, I haven't, man. You're giving me lots of names I need to look into, mate. I've been speaking to too many people in person. That's the problem. I've not been doing enough reading whilst I've been out here, unfortunately.
Yeah, so he talks about like the power of meditation and the power of belief and like the science behind it. And it's like,
no. Funny you mentioned that.
You know Joe Dispenza.
Yeah, a person I met a couple of weeks ago, he recommended that same guy to me. Joe Dispenza. That was it. Yeah, anyway.
Yeah, it's interesting because he talks about like the power of belief in the quantum field. So the quantum field is everything around us. We kind of call it like the universe, what people would call God, just like whatever the vibrations and frequencies around us. And he's talking about like the quantum field, how we are the quantum field, and we can connect to that. And through thought and belief, we can send out vibrations and kind of manifest our own reality. But we just need to be aware of the thoughts we have. And he's got a book called "You Are the Placebo," which is literally saying that the more you think and believe things, and the more you do that with intention, the more you program your brain to actually like attach emotions to the thought and beliefs that you want, the more you can actually like create your reality. And it goes back to that law of attraction stuff. I used to think like I don't believe that, but I think we underestimate like the true power of our own mind. But I feel like that comes from your sense of self. Like there has to be someone making the decisions to formulate the belief of I am this person, or I want to be like this person.
Yeah, I agree, man. I agree. I've got a question for you now, actually, man. We were talking about sort of like disassociating from the ego, essentially, that you become a sort of more, you essentially get into a better sense of flow when you disassociate from that ego, that voice inside. How do you sort of go about your day in a way that is non-judgmental because of that? Because I often find that when you start doing things like this and you start seeing people act in a way which you're not anymore, part of you does slightly become a bit judgmental. And it's the art of not being judgmental because of it. Like you would judge people for just thinking, oh, this guy's obviously not doing this. This guy's obviously on a lower level of, vibration, a lower level of self-improvement spiritually. And the trick is, I've found, I've been struggling a little bit, to be honest with you, openly, about that sort of judgmental side of things. That I've been thinking, well, now I'm on this, now I'm learning all these things. These people around me, they're not doing that. Like they're clearly missing out on something. And I have to constantly reel myself back and think, no. I cannot think like that. But I have to actively do that. So I was just going to ask you, man, how do you sort of not stop, but how do you sort of rein in the judgment a little bit?
I think it's about understanding where the judgment comes from. So why do you feel, why is that coming up in your mind, and why is that the context of your thoughts that you're judging that person in that way? And often it's a reflection of something that you don't like about yourself, or something that's going wrong with yourself. So let's say, for example, like I go to work and there's people there who aren't on this spiritual path. Maybe they don't meditate, and I have the thought of, oh, look what they're doing. They're just going to stay in Marks and Spencers for the rest of their lives. And I judge that, and I'm getting this like moral high ground in my own mind. That's coming from a place of insecurity in me that I'm worried that could be me. It's not them. It's really just a reflection of something that's going on inside of me. So anytime you get annoyed at someone, anytime you get anxious, anytime an emotion arises in your mind from the external world, it's often a reflection of yourself. And there's a really good quote by a guy called Peter Crone, which is, life presents you with people and circumstances to show you where you're not free. Yeah. And what he means by this is every time something happens in your mind that's negative and that's come from an external scenario, whether a person, a situation, that is life showing you that you are attached to this identification of a sense of self. You've got this narrative around that situation that is taking you away from the true version of you. It's your ego getting wrapped up in its own desires.
Jeez. Yeah, no, that's really true. Yeah, I can see that now. I can see that. It's sort of like an anxiety that you have within yourself that you will become that unless you do something. Like I found actually in the last few weeks whilst I've been out here, that it's actually quite a lot of the wider self-improvement community, actually, where I'm getting a little bit annoyed with, actually. The sort of the flashy side of self-improvement, the side which says all you need is money, success, taking pictures of skyscrapers while waving a Rolex. That side of self-improvement has actually started getting on my nerves quite a bit now, because I just see it as very vapid and not true to me. But there is part of me which still likes that. So it's like coming to terms with both sides of your personality. You are on one end, you like the sort of the spiritual side, you like the hippie side, you like hostels, backpacking, all of that. But also you like success, you like power, you like prestige. And both of these things I found I have to try and bring into one. And that is you. That is your personality. But many people can say they're actually quite contradictory. They're actually against each other. But I found that by being an authentic version of myself, I can bring these things together.
That's the whole goal of self-actualization.
I'm not sure how this relates to anything we've spoken about, mate, but I just wanted to bring that up.
Nah, it's a really good, that was a really good point, Jerome. And that actually leads to the point of self-actualization. So if you look at the mind from the psychoanalytical theory, it's that our mind is made up of subcomponents of personalities. So we haven't got just one person. There is a version of you that is anxious in this situation. There's a version of you that's confident here. There's a version of you that wants to achieve this. And all these subcomponents of personalities, they've got their own goals and desires. So when part of you is like contradictory and paradoxical, like one part of you wants success, but one part of you doesn't want to live in hostels and that, they're just different subcomponents of personalities that are living in your mind. And the whole goal of self-actualization, or coming to be your true self, your authentic self, is getting all these subcomponents of personalities and turning them into one. It's getting all of their desires, all their emotions, all their feelings, understanding them and integrating them into one whole being. And that's the whole point of self-actualization. It's difficult though, because you go through life and like sometimes I sit down, I'm like, right, I'm going to grow a podcast, I'm going to be a successful podcaster, and then the next day I wake up and I'm like, I just want to go travel, I want to go to Thailand and just sit in a meditation retreat and not do anything, and the next day I do something else. But it's about really communicating what all these subcomponents of personalities want and trying to work out a happy medium. And that's what you said, you're trying to work out a happy medium of what can I do to like be happy and like fulfill all these desires going on in my mind.
Because they're both as true as each other. That's the thing. Not one of them is insincere. Like I do sincerely like the spirit. I'm not sure. I don't really know how to call it, mate. But I do like the deeper spiritual, hippie side of self-improvement. Whilst I also like the financial side of it as well. You need money to be financially free in this world. You need to. You do need money. But I found while being out here, I care far less about the materialistic things. Whereas when I was back at home, I cared far more about the materialistic things. Out here, I'm more interested in discovery, mental discovery of myself and the world around me. So you're right. It's they're not diametrically opposed to each other. It's about bringing them both together, and that is your actual personality, or a closer rendition of your personality.
Yeah, for sure. And I think when you go on social media and like you see all these people that are like quite clearly like just not portraying their true self, and they're like, "Oh, look at my Rolex," or
I
"I'm on
can
a
see it.
skyscraper," and take it. I know it just like for me, Jerome, I look at it and go, "You're quite clearly portraying someone you're not," and that
Yeah.
in itself is going to have repercussions because it's like you're trying to live up to this ideal whilst shaming away the true version of yourself, your true interest, and you're coming so disconnected. And I find it really inauthentic. I think them people that are trying to copy the Andrew
Exactly.
Tates or copy the whoever the content, whoever they watch on YouTube, I think they're just leaving themselves up to they're leaving themselves up for a big fall.
But I agree entirely, mate. But that's why I talked about the judgmental side of things, because I've been seeing that recently, and I've been sort of thinking in my head exactly that. You are being so inauthentic, but me thinking that is coming across as now judgmental almost in my own mind. That I'm now judging these people who maybe they themselves need to go on a journey as well. Maybe they themselves need to do this, because I can look back and think many a times in my life where I've imitated things like this before. I've wanted to I wanted to show this position as a like a politics student, or like as a person who's interested in certain fields that are not, that wasn't a true reflection at the time of my personality. So it's very easy to fall into these traps where you pretend to be something else. It's not easy. It's actually
Now, Joe,
sorry.
I've got
Yeah.
really funny I've got a really funny way of looking at this, right? So picture these people that you judge and you got this idea of, picture them as when they were a baby, when they were a little kid, right? And just think, this is a human that's trying to figure out life just as I am. And my
Yeah.
idea of judging them, thinking they've got all these bad intentions and that is they're just people trying to figure things out. There is some people that are inherently bad in the world, and you see that through what happens with like terrorist attacks and like people who molest children. All them things are inherently bad. But the majority of people that we judge, that we think are bad, like you go to work and this
They're
person's
not bad.
miserable, and you look at them and go, "Oh, they're a bad person. They're horrible to be around." But if you was to picture them as a baby and see their whole life unravel and see all the experiences they've had, all the trauma they've experienced, you can lead with compassion that way. So the people that are just trying to figure themselves out by like posting all this content, pretending they're this person with all the flashy watches, they're just trying to get attention. They're just trying to like feel loved.
Exactly.
We're all just trying to combat this feeling of we are whole and we are one. And I think people do it in different ways. I do it through this podcast. I do it to try and get attention this way. You might do it in a different way. This person might flash his Rolex and do it that way. But really, we're all just screaming out to feel okay and feel heard. So I think if you look at it that way, it kind of takes away the judgment and you
Exactly.
like lead with compassion.
Yeah, lead with compassion, man. And also, I sort of had the idea that maybe they are being authentic to themselves as well. Maybe they are actually like that. These people who post, they are actually like this. They're not trying to pretend to be somebody else. They do genuinely like the more materialistic side of life. And there's nothing wrong with that. The issue is when you're not being authentic. That's how I see it. If you are authentically anything, okay, if you're authentically a bad person, I'm not going to like you, but I respect the fact that you're authentically a bad person. I think it's inauthenticity which is the big issue here. I think that's the big issue. I think a lot of people are dealing with is that they don't know who they are, and so because they don't know who they are inauthentic about what they want to do and the image and the world that they want to create and interact with. So I think that's the key, man. I think it's knowing who you are and discovering who you are, and then from there working things out.
Yeah, it's really hard though, because like who I am is always changing. I look at myself like 3 months ago, then 6 months ago,
I
then
know.
9 months ago, then 2 years ago, and I'm constantly evolving. And that is a natural process of anything in reality. We are constantly evolving, we're constantly changing. Reality is flux, it's never concrete. And the idea that we need to be
But
this
you always
concrete
have set
person
values.
is
Yeah, but you have
yeah, go
set
on, Joe.
values though. But you, sorry for interrupting. But no, I just wanted to say you do have set values though. There are things that define you. Yes, your personality changes. Yes, you discover things about that, about this, and you do grow as a person, and that's obviously change. But it's always done under the idea that you are still yourself. That makes sense. As long as you are not pretending to be somebody else. That's the thing I have here. Like, of course, your personality can change, but as long as you are authentically that person and then you are growing into being authentically somebody else. Doesn't matter whether your personality has changed or not. You are still authentic. It's when you are deliberately trying to be somebody else, which not a lot of people can admit to. Like, nobody will ever admit they're trying to be Andrew Tate. But you can see it, you know, a lot of people, you can tell they're trying to be Andrew Tate. And the reason why Andrew Tate was so popular is because he wasn't trying to be anybody else. He was just being himself. And that's why it worked for him. But when I see people trying to be Andrew Tate, a few of them work. Like, a few of them genuinely, they can pull it off because that is authentic to themselves. Like, they genuinely are like that. But a lot of people I see doing it, it doesn't work because they are not like that. Like, if I tried to be like Andrew Tate, it wouldn't work. It just wouldn't, because I'm not as, you know, I think he's funny, but I'm not as materialistic. I don't care about Bugattis. I don't care. I just don't. So for me, it wouldn't work. And I think for the same as you. But some people, kudos to them. They can authentically pretend to be like somebody else because they themselves are like them. And that's the thing. It's just about imitating a person. Maybe that's the thing. You can take inspiration from people. That's the thing. I'm not saying here like you cannot ever take inspiration from anybody. Like, obviously I take inspiration from loads of people I bump into, but it's always done under the lens of it still being yourself.
Yeah, it's
Sorry,
like you're taking.
I went on a bit there. Yeah.
No, it makes sense, Jerome. Like, you're taking what you've learned and you're interpreting that through all of your own experiences, your own interpretation of who you are. I like what you said. Like, your values stay the same, although your personality changes. Your values still stay the same. So, say if you value helping or serving others, or you value integrity, like keeping with your word, doesn't matter if you change as a person. That value there still stays the same. You value your own integrity. You value being authentic. So I think that was really important for people, that like you can change as a person, your personality can change, but your values, you should get really super clear on what means a lot to you, the essence of your core, what feels right and what's wrong. And you can tell that by, like, if you're in a social situation and you're like trying to act up and then you kind of say something mean to someone, or you say something cruel to someone to put them down to make you look better, that will have a feeling in your body like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. You'll get this like surge of feeling bad about yourself, and that is you. That's you indicating, that's your true consciousness. We could say that's the voice of God telling you that you shouldn't be doing that, and that's your value, to not make people feel bad, to lead with compassion, to serve others.
Well, shame is the lowest vibration, isn't it? It's the lowest thing down on the vibration scale is shame, because it's you feeling. It's not just like you've insulted somebody else. It's that you've almost insulted yourself. That's what shame is. It's that you've acted so inauthentically that now I'm vibrating at such a low level that my life force is dead. That's essentially what it is. It's your life force is dead. And that feeling you talked about, geez, so many people experienced that. Fuck me, I've experienced that before, trying to fit in before, where you try and pretend to be somebody else and try and put them down to put yourself up. But nah, never. I've found actually you should do the opposite. You should bring people up with you. Like, I found that in social situations, you stand out so much better than others if, instead of putting people down, obviously don't put people down, everyone knows this, but you bring people up. Like, you see a person who's a bit quiet, a bit more introverted, you speak to them above all. You speak to them, you talk to them, and you bring them out of their shell, and then they're happier, they're more comfortable. And it doesn't work for everybody, but what it does with some people. And then you, because of that, your life force, you vibrate now on a higher level, because it's not you're not operating on joy anymore. You're operating on something else now, the higher level now, because you have actively not just improved yourself, but you've improved somebody else along in the process.
Yeah, I had a conversation with someone in Marks and Spencer's the other day, and I had this. So talking about judgment, I had this idea of this girl. Like, she's like horrible. She's like really miserable. She's really like loud. She always just doesn't come across very well. And so I had this like mental narrative around her that she is this person that's just miserable and too loud and arrogant. And then I had a conversation with her, and I was just being my authentic self, because I didn't really care what she thought, because I had this idea around who she was. So I wasn't trying to portray something. I wasn't trying to act to impress her. I was just being myself. And we had this crazy conversation. She started telling me all of her traumas and like how she had a few like a miscarriage and all these things she was telling me. And I was like, whoa. And like, she really opened up, and it was like, because I had the ability to be myself and listen, and I wasn't trying to portray someone else, it was like I opened up a portal for her to have this authentic conversation. And I seen the true human that was there, not this like ego that's gone through all this trauma. I seen this true version, and I think that's all we can try and do is like lead with compassion, stop like trying to impress people and just like try and be a portal for people to open up and be their authentic self.
And it's one of the greatest experiences you can have with another person is when they open up authentically to you and you authentically receive and listen to it. Like that, it's one of the greatest experiences you can have between two humans because it's so genuine. And I feel that's what a lot of people are looking for now. In the world, in the modern society, I feel everything's become a lot faker and everything's become less real and genuine. And so things like that are now more valuable than ever. Like you mentioned how you didn't have you were completely genuine. You'd let all ego go in that conversation with this woman, and she could tell because you were now authentic. You weren't trying to portray an image of, oh, I'm this person. You were just yourself, and people can subtly, subconsciously tell these things. And I found it here as well that, you know, if you lead in conversation with, I'm this person, I've done that, I'm this, you might be authentic to a point, like you might not be lying, but you're coming at it from a position of, I am this person, I do this for you. When in reality, I think in a lot of conversations, you should go in with the position that you are not this person at all. You are a human and you are going to listen to them and understand where they're coming from. And I think that I know we spoke about a lot of topics here. I know we have, but I think that just increases your charisma and ultimately, end of the day, is that you're prepared to actually listen to people.
Yeah, it's that coming with the right intention of like,
Exactly.
I'm here to listen to that person, and that intention. I think I mentioned this in one of my other podcasts, like having the intention to go up and actually listen to someone and lead with curiosity and not to
Lead
judge.
with
That
curiosity.
intention, lead with curiosity. That like intention itself is going to allow you to communicate and to be charismatic and to connect with people on a deeper level. But if you have even if it's subconscious, if you have the intention of, there's a pretty girl over there, I want to impress her, that is going to come through in your body language. It's going to come away in your voice tonality. It's going to come away with the way you communicate. It's going to show through, and all you're going to do is try to like hide that. You're just trying to hide it because you're trying to portray yourself as someone else. But when you lead with the intention of, this is interesting, I'm going to find out about this person, or I'm going to find out her kinks, or I'm going to find out what she likes, what she doesn't like, whatever. You just lead with that curiosity. You're coming from such a natural place of...
It's natural. It's why
it's natural.
It's why often guys often have the best charisma and riz with girls they're not attracted to because they're not trying to impress them. They're just being themselves. And it's when you get rid of that assumption. It's when you get rid of that expectation that from this conversation I will get this. When you get rid of that, that's when the conversation becomes far more natural and free flowing because you're just being yourself.
Yeah, it's so annoying, Jerome, though, because like for me, the prettier the girl gets and the more attracted I am with her, the more anxious I get because I can see I need to try and like portray a certain character. And like I speak to some women that like they're not ugly, I'm just not attracted to them. And like I'm really easygoing, I make them laugh, like everything seems cool. I'm like, oh cool, I could do that with an attractive girl. Then I get in front of a girl I find like mega attractive, and it's like this barrier just goes up, and it's like as much as I'm trying not to perform, there is something in you that like has this expectation of like, you need to impress her, you need to make her out like this, you need to make yourself come across well, and that then creates the anxiety because you're performing. And then the more you perform, the more you realize that you're not acting in accordance with who you want to be perceived as, and that creates more anxiety, and you get stuck in the loop of anxiety trying to impress her.
Well, you know what I find in those exact situations you've spoken to, that anxiety comes about. Are we still going? Sorry.
Still go, Joe. Yeah,
something popped up on my screen. Sorry. I find in those exact situations where things like that happen, what you just spoke about, the anxiety often comes because you feel that woman gets so many approaches, so many matches, so many of these. She's so attractive that who am I? You know, I'm just a random geezer. You know, I'm nothing especially important. So you get that in your own head, and although you would, you deny and say no, I'm myself. You put yourself down subtly, and you think, oh yeah, because this person obviously she's so attractive, she gets so much attention. That what am I going to do? I'm not even going to dent the car. You know, like it's going to be nothing.
Yeah, you think like you forget that she's a human. You really do. You think like she's this like goddess who's up here and like she's a different species to you. But it's like, this is just a human that wants the exact same that you want.
It's the same with everybody you speak to. I think we talked about this when we met in London, man. They're just people. In the end of the day, they are just people. Same as me, same as you. A celebrity is just as much as a human as myself. And I think they subtly respect you. Women, people in positions who are above you, they will subtly respect you more when you don't put them on a pedestal, when you don't worship them as being something that's above them, like a goddess or an influencer. When you just look at them and like, hey, you're like me. Like, I respect what you've done and where you come from, but you're like me in the end of the day.
Yeah, have you read Models by Mark Manson?
No, Neil, you're embarrassing me because you're naming all these things I need to read.
This is a really good book. So it's like a dating book, and it talks about the main concept of it is non-neediness, which is like women find you most attractive when you're not trying to impress them, when you don't care about what they think about you. That is when you come across like most attractive to women and most attractive to anyone. Like, you're going to communicate and best with people when you actually just stop caring. But it is hard, Jerome. Our minds are evolutionary programmed to want to care what people think. It's important. We obviously live in a world where we've got social media, we've got phones, which is adding on to the comparison. So I think you just need to like go out. We're coming back to that. Go out into the world and socialize and actually communicate.
Well, let yourself go a little bit. Go out into the world. Stop taking yourself too seriously and loosen up. That really helps when it comes to dating and with women, by the way. Like, nothing is more unattractive than being uptight and in your own head because they can tell you're not present. I found that out in Thailand here, I've had a lot more success than I've had back at home. And being out in Thailand, you can... Now, I know you have to say you have to act authentically, and I mean that 100%. But if you act a little bit like Captain Jack Sparrow, if that makes sense, if you act a little bit like, you know, you're very loose, you're sort of, you're loose, you're free, you're intelligent and eccentric, my God, that style, as long as it's being authentic to yourself, and I think with me, I think it's not being disingenuous if I behave a little bit like that. It's just another side of my personality that really shines through. And so you just have to, I think when it comes to dating and women and, you know, anything like that, I found that just loosening up is really important because you're being more genuine in that sense. There's no expectations. Either way, you're going to be happy. Either way, this is a cool experience.
And the repetitions help with that. Like if you've got like a big date coming or you want to speak to some people, like even if you just go to the shop and go and speak to the cashier and have a conversation, it's like because it's social skills at the end of the day. It is a skill kind of, you kind of have to like learn how to do it. You have to learn how to be yourself. So if you just go to the cashier and just go like, how's your day been? It looks busy in here, and have this like little conversation. Yeah, and it'll make eye contact and like. I can't remember who I heard say it. They said like socially lube yourself up, like get socially lubricated so you can like feel like you're in the flow, because like the first conversation you have, if you've not been socializing for a while, is going to be a bit weird because you're not used to it. But the more conversations you have, the more you get used to sitting in the awkwardness, the more you get used to just letting the flow of the conversation happen. And it's like with anything, it's just repetitions, exposure, repetitions. Keep doing these things, keep socializing, keep going on dates, keep speaking to women, and you will get better at this. Like it's unrealistic to think that you can sit. Social lubricant.
Yeah, it's social lubricant, man. Like, I love that. You have to do that. You can't go into these situations and expect to be in as good form if you haven't warmed up beforehand. And you're right. You can just get that from talking to cashiers, talking to people in the street. They may think you're crazy. Like out here in Thailand, everyone's a lot friendlier. Like because the tourists are out here to find themselves, as they say. The locals are smiley, very friendly. So in England, it's trickier, but not impossible, depending on where you are. But yeah, just talk to people, man. And it's that thing about having no expectations. If you start thinking you're going to go in there with expectations, you've lost. But the expectation should be that you improve your skills, and you will do in the process.
Yeah, I remember you saying last time we spoke about like treating life as like a video game and treat yourself as like a video game character. Just go out there and it's like, look, I've got to do all these. I want to get better with women, or I want to get better in social situations. I'm going to go out and train my XP. So I'm going to gain some XP speaking to the cashier. Then I'm going to gain some more, maybe stopping a person on the street and asking them for the time. And like these things actually do add up. They create confidence. You're building up courage as you're doing them. And that courage, and like, I think people underestimate how strong and adaptable they are. Like you're so adaptable and you're so strong. You just don't realize it because you're not taking action. And the more you put yourself in uncomfortable situations, it's that thing between order and chaos. The more chaos you put yourself in, the more your order grows and consumes that chaos, and the more normal that becomes. So if you just keep slowly exposing yourself to more and more situations, pushing yourself out your comfort zone, then your familiarity with them situations becomes normality, and then you become confident. But you just need to like lead. Yeah, go on.
And it starts truly becoming authentic as well. That's the crucial thing. It starts becoming authentic because you've exposed yourself that many times that you're not actually pretending to be a confident person anymore. You are confident, and that's what I did with myself.
It's that Alex Hormozy quote. You don't get confident by shouting affirmations in the mirror, but by having an undeniable stack of proof you are who you say you are. Outwork your self-doubt.
Outwork your self-doubt. That's probably one of his greatest quotes, I have to say, because it's so true. Like you have to have accolades to your success, you know, and these accolades don't have to be big things, but you do have to actually you manifest what you are essentially. And if you have proof that you are what you are, then you're not manifesting anymore. You just are.
So Jerome, does your mind work in a way like you see these people and they somehow just have this inherent belief that they can achieve things, and they've always had it? Like mine works on the opposite way, where my mind tends to think that like I can't do things. So I feel like for me, I have to lead more with action. Whereas I think some people, they do have the actual ability just to like believe they can do anything and go and do it, and they don't need the evidence. They just think and they can act. But like mine seems to be like I need to lead with that Alex Hormozy quote, like outwork your self-doubt, because the tendency of my mind seems to be that like I discount any positive thoughts with negative thoughts, and that seems to happen continuously. So it's like I have to give myself evidence to give myself proof, whereas I think some people can just have this belief and they can just go out and do things.
That's really interesting you say that, because I'd say you were quite the positive, affirming person, man. I'd say that surprises me. I thought you'd be the opposite.
Yeah, it's always weird. I always get this like compliment, like you're really confident, but it seems to not feel like that in my own mind. I don't know if that's just my perception and awareness of me focusing on the negative too much, but like, I always feel this massive disconnect between like how I come across and how I'm actually feeling in my mind.
Well, I'm, you know, it's funny you say that. You said, you know, you think like that. I'm both, actually. I'm actually both. Like, a lot of the time, I do believe that, oh, yeah, I need proof. You know, my mind's very negative sometimes. It's constantly saying, oh, you're not doing this strong enough. You're not working hard enough. I beat myself up a lot. And I did back in the day beat myself up so much, especially in this time last year during self-improvement days. But I've been self-improvement for a while, but you get what I mean. Like this time last year, I'd constantly be saying, oh, I'm not doing this, I'm not doing that. And it's pushing yourself, but negatively pushing yourself. But also a lot of the time, I feel as arrogant and as egotistical as this might sound, that I'm destined by God to achieve things. And that's the weird little thing I have to factor in my mind here. That part of me is constantly beating myself up, but the other part of me believes that I'm God's chosen one. And I know it sounds so arrogant, and it's about saying that in a way which doesn't make you sound arrogant, but it's just a feeling that you have within you, and it's how I sort of go about the world sometimes. That, you know, that a lot of the time I'm not very confident, but a lot of the time I am very confident. Why sometimes do I feel like that, and other times do I feel like this? When in reality, I think it's because that these are two extremes. These are two wildly different extremes, and reality is actually in the middle, if that makes sense. Like, you're not that, but what you are is somewhere in between. You are a flawed individual fundamentally, who is great at these things and bad at these things, and so you should factor both of these things together and go ahead.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think sometimes you can easily like focus on the negative. You can cultivate this idea around you are someone who's anxious, you're someone who isn't confident, but you do forget the fact that like I do have belief in myself. Like I'm similar to you, Jerome, where I think like something's destined for me to achieve something big, and it doesn't have to be like I'm not going to change the world or I'm not going to do this. But
I hope I didn't say that like I think I'm the next prophet of God or something like that. I didn't mean it like I didn't mean it.
You're the next Jesus, Jerome.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely. No, that's the thing, but it's very tricky. I've never actually told that to anybody before, but I just wanted to be 100% honest and genuine with you. But that's honestly what goes through my head sometimes. And it's about factoring that and thinking, well, you know, like, I know I'm not, but like I want to be genuine and I want to be honest. And like, is honesty and being authentic and genuine saying 100% of the truth all the time, even if it makes you sound mad and crazy, or is it not that? Like, I think talking about honesty and authenticity is so important, and I think that's what my main sort of brand is at the moment. It's being authentic and genuine and 100% interpretation of who you are, but that comes with the negative side of things sometimes. It comes with actually being like, okay, I am like this. I am authentically telling you this. Am I crazy now because of it? I don't think I am, but that, you know what I mean? It's like, do you say these things?
But you've got to have that belief that something is like special in you, because if not, you're never going to go out and try things, or you're never going to have that thought of belief that you can do something. I think everyone is destined for greatness, and I think everyone has a responsibility to go out and achieve great things. And if everyone followed that pursuit, if everyone followed that responsibility of being the best version of themselves, imagine how good the world would be. A lot of our problems come from people don't take action. They have no belief in themselves, they don't take responsibility, they don't follow their truth, and then they get stuck in negative states of mind. Then they take negative actions which lead and affect other people around them, and then that makes society worse. But if everyone was to lead with the truth, like, the truth is that you are destined for something good. If you followed and did the right things, if you lived by the truth and did things correctly, something good would come out of that, and the world would be a better place for that. And if everyone did that, then the world would be a greater place. There's this really good quote by Jordan Peterson. It's like, don't criticize the world till you've ordered your house. And like, look around. Is your house perfectly clean? Is your room clean? Is everything in order? Do you have all your finances in order? Don't look out at the world and criticize everyone else, because your life, there is things that could be improved. And if everyone flips it on themselves and goes like, how could I better myself? Then the world would be a better place. Because a lot of the things that happen now, a lot of the shame that comes across, a lot of the bad things that happen in the world are because people aren't happy with themselves. They're doing these things out of self-hate and self-shame.
Well, it reminds me, it's funny you mentioned that quote, don't complain about the world till you've tidied your house. It also reminds me of that other quote, which goes, you cannot change the world until you've changed yourself. And I feel that's another thing that a lot of people are struggling with these days, is that they have this this complex, which they say their lives suck. Their lives are, they're miserable, they're not happy with themselves, but yet they want to try and change the world. They get into politics and they sort of give their opinions of the world, and they say it in a way which, I can do this, I can change the world. And I like that to a point. I think that it shows great ambition and great strive. But if you cannot change yourself, and you yourself are in a position of great upset and misery, then you're not really in a position to be talking to others about how to change the world. And I see that just a lot, especially, I did politics for 3 years at university, and I was always around people who had this sort of slight egotistical vein to them, that they say, if I was in charge, I would do this. But they themselves were not happy in themselves. And I feel that's a big issue that people are just not doing properly. They're caring too much about the wider world outside of them while not caring about themselves within. And you can see this with the whole, okay, I'm going to mention it, the Israel-Palestine situation. Out here in Thailand, it's not that people don't care about what's going on in the news at all. It's that people care more about the things that are closer to themselves. They care more about the things they have a direct influence and control over. So no one's getting het up about an issue which doesn't directly affect them. Whereas in the West, our own personal lives are sort of lacking in many ways, that we attach our happiness and attach our sense of purpose with something that we do not directly have control over, and then we pick sides. We're like, oh, I'm Israel, I'm Palestine, I'm Russia, I'm Ukraine, I'm Trump, I'm Biden, and these things don't directly affect us. You see, they're not actually part of our personalities at all, but we've taken our personality and we've said, right, this is who we are now. We have attached ourselves to these issues that don't directly affect us. And we are not happy because of that in the process. Our happiness is now determined upon something else rather than from within. And it's the same with football teams. If you don't, without even being political, you can say the same thing about football teams. I'm Arsenal, you're Chelsea. And it's like, my happiness is now determined based upon what my football club does rather than my actual self.
Yeah, it's like people look for that. This is
Yeah.
what religion used to give people. So religion used to give people these set of values and this bigger meaning, but now they don't have the values of religion because like barely anyone's religious, especially in the West now. We've kind of lost these like
Such a
values to
shame.
live by and this meaning. And religion's got its own problems when it goes to the dogmatic where people
Of
like are
course.
so this is my god, that's your god, and people become that's another form of an ideology. But what's happening now is people are falling into these ideologies of politics and I'm this person, I'm Israel, I'm Palestine, I'm this, that, I'm Trump, Biden. Because they're so attached with these things, they forget to see the other person's perspective,
Yep.
and we stop leading with compassion then. And this world today, like it looks like the world is just severely lacking compassion and severely lacking like just a step back away from emotions. We seem to give emotion now, and emotion's important. Emotion is part of being a human, but it's become the main source of people's talking points. Like we're no longer thinking with compassion and leading with more like logic. We're just so tied up in, oh, this makes me feel like this, so
Yeah, it
I'm
must be
this side
wrong.
and now that
Yeah.
side.
Well, that's the thing. What we've done is we've just, as a society, we've just replaced religion with something else. Like it's not that, we in the West, despite the fact people increasingly don't believe in God, we're not an atheist society at all. We've just replaced the worship of God with the worship of something else. We worship instead. We get het up in the same way about religion than we do about, and then we used to get het up about religion. We do in the same way now about politics, and that's what I was just saying about disassociating your happiness from yourself to something else. And you're right. Religion is dogmatic. There are dogmatic elements to it, but it also gives you a sense of belief in something deeper than yourself, and that's what we are lacking now. We don't have this belief in anything that's deeper than ourselves anymore, and so we try and find it through things that are not as pure in nature, like politics, for example. Politics is deeply corrupted. It's not pure. It's not an essence of finding yourself or finding the creator. Or I think you know what I think you know what I'm trying to say, but just can't word it very well for some reason. But yeah, it's just about. Yeah, you get what I mean. Sorry, I lost my train of thought a little bit.
Yeah, nah, it happens, Jerome. I've done it a couple of times. This
I don't know. I
podcast where
lost
you're
my train
talking,
of
you're
thought there.
like, what was I mentioning?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
was like,
no,
what
it's
was
really
I talking about? Yeah.
it's really weird how like we've kind of lost this connection to the divine, and
That's it.
like you have like a value. So how we see the world is we see the world through like a value hierarchy. So there's like an infinite amount of things we can look at, right? Like you walk into a room and there is unlimited objects to look at. So your mind needs something to value so it can put its attention on that. So you see the world through like a value hierarchy. So for me, what God is and what the essence of like religion gives you, it gives you a set of how to value things. It gives you a way of putting your attention on the right things. So if you follow the values of Christ or you follow the values of the Buddha or whatever the Buddhist teachings, you now have a lens of looking through the world of things to put your attention on, which is going to do good.
Absolutely.
But because now we've wiped out the slate of religion and we've wiped out the slate of the values, we no longer have this value to what to put our attention on. So now we're falling into the hedonistic traps of the instant gratification or
Yep.
the emotional traps of getting stuck in ideologies. We're no longer valuing the world through compassion. I think that's what religion gave us. Not that we need to believe in some fake like this God or this personified version of this divine being, but it gave you the values of how to the hierarchy of your perception. It helped you perceive the world correctly. And I think now we just need to get to a point where we can all have that for ourselves. We can determine how do we value the world and how do we perceive the world? What should we put our attention on? Because where you put your attention is where you spend your life. Your attention is your time and your time is your life. So if you don't know what your perception is or where you put your attention, then you're just putting it on things that aren't going to serve you or aren't going to serve others.
Yeah. And it's why so many people are lost now because of it. They don't have this connection with the divine or connection with the deeper side of life anymore because we as a society have abandoned abandoned belief in God. Yeah, it's essentially it, mate. We have to be careful here because it's not like we need to go back to this. We need, for our soul's sake. Well, actually, literally for our soul's sake. But you can't force people to do things that they don't want to. You can't force people to go, be religious. But I think people need to discover. They need to come to their own conclusion, if that makes sense. that it is important to have faith in something. It is important to believe in something far deeper than yourself, because then I believe the world not makes more sense, but as you said, it's more compassionate. We need to lead with compassion, and I feel, although you can be an atheist and compassionate, there's nothing stopping you. I feel atheism does lead into a trap where you sort of do not value life as much, if that makes sense. Oh, we're all just stardust. Oh, we're gonna die. You know what I mean? And it's very nihilistic, and it's not a good way of living. And I feel that's what religion gives you. It gives you a sense of something deeper than yourself. And I feel it's a great shame now that we are abandoning it in the West.
Yeah, and religion doesn't even have to be the idea that it's Christianity or Islam. We don't have to subscribe to a certain religion. You can have
These
your
aren't
own
verses.
religion.
These aren't.
I'm not even sure what the.
It's not. It's
Yeah,
not
go on,
about
Gerard.
being one. It's not about two different camps here. It's not about Christianity versus Islam versus Judaism versus Buddhism or whatever. It's three of the major religions in the world believe in the same damn God. You know, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all believe in the same creator. It's just different interpretations of that. And the other three religions, the ones that originated from India, they also have a sort of correlation in a sort of deeper sense of things. You know, they're very much into sort of meditation, and I'm not a scholar of these things, but they have they have an understanding of a wider world around them. So, although you could argue that these religions are opposed to each other, you can also argue they have a lot of a lot of things similar within each other as well. They have a belief in a higher power.
I think they're all teaching the same thing. It's just human egos and
Exactly.
personification of this ideal is separating us from that. They're all teaching the same thing. I think if you really look, and you can observe that if you switch your attention into your own mind and you observe consciousness, like this is what you get when you really deeply meditate. And I know we talked about like living out in the world, but if you can go through periods of your life where you like do a lot of meditation, maybe you sit in meditation retreat or something, you start eroding the barriers of what's going on in the mind, and you start realizing that like the nature of reality is oneness. Like when I sat my
It's
meditation
oneness.
retreat, this is on like, yeah,
This the one you
I
did
was
in
on
Was
day,
this the one you did in Bali?
yeah. So I was on day 7, Jerome, and like I'd been meditating for what 80 hours at this point, like over 7 days. So it was a lot of meditation, and it got to one of the sittings, and I was sat there, and I had this pain in my leg, and like it was so severe because you're sat in like cross-legged for like 10 hours a day. Like it feels like someone's ripping you like your leg from your knee. It's horrible. And I had this like severe pain, but I got to the point where I realized the pain was down there and I was up here. But then as soon as I had that realization, I'm like, I don't exist. I'm not up here. And the identification of a sense of self just disappeared. Like I was no longer me. And I was in the room, and it's a weird feeling that like the person in front of me, the person behind me, the person next to me, everyone in the room, I no longer cared about myself more than I did them. Like we were all
Yeah.
the same. Like I had compassion and love for the person next to me as much as I did for my family or me. And honestly, mate, like this whole feeling of just like everything was vibrating in my body. I could feel every atom vibrating. And it was that true, like that's the only insight other than like psychedelic trips that I've had through meditation, which is like everything is one. Like we
Yeah.
are just all this same thing experiencing. And that's for me, that's what consciousness is. It's that oneness of reality.
We're all connected. We're all connected, man. And it's interesting you mentioned that meditation retreat that you did. I spoke to some people a few weeks ago when I was on Koh Tao, and they were talking. I just overheard them talking about a meditation retreat, and because you mentioned it that you had done one, I sort of turned around to them and just started speaking to them because, you know, screw any social, you know what I mean? Just have a conversation for the sake of it. And they were talking about it, and they said that during the retreat that they went on, you couldn't speak to people as well. Was that the same for you? That you couldn't speak to the people you were with. All you could do was just eat the food that was there, sleep, and meditate.
Yeah, so you stayed on a strict schedule. Like it was a 10-day silent for passing, of course. So you was not
Yeah,
allowed to. You wasn't even allowed to look at anyone in the eyes, really. Like, and you go
that
into
was
your
it.
own state
Yeah,
of like, yeah, you go into your own world where you don't even realize people are there. You just kind of like you're so stuck in your own head and like trying to figure things out that you forget people exist. But yeah, you're not allowed to talk to anyone either, which is brutal, mate. Is the hardest thing I've ever done.
yeah. But that's the thing, man. I feel you need to have both. You need to experience great moments of your life where you are solitary, but you also need to go out into the world and interact with it. Like you need both, and I think that's the common trend that we are coming to in all these different topics that we are speaking about is It's the importance of duality here. It's not one or the other. It's elements of both into one. It's order and chaos. It's yin and yang. It's wu wei. It's effortless action. It's all coming together, both elements into one. And that, I think, is the key here, with regardless of what we're talking about. It's funny you mentioned almost everything we've spoken about today. You could simply define as in not taking one thing directly, not taking another thing directly, but merging them together.
Yeah, so I've really like reflecting on this conversation, Jerome.
Yeah.
We've been talking for an hour and 10 minutes, and it's
Oh, really?
always come back to balance.
I've not even looked.
It's
You know
come
what's weird? I've not even looked at the clock. I've not even. 70 minutes, and I've not even checked. How weird is that?
It's crazy, isn't it, mate? I know when you have these conversations, this is why I value human interaction so much, I think. And it's, and I love the podcast for this. Like, when I communicate with people like this, like, I'm not trying, there's no intention of trying to get good content. There's no intention of trying to force a conversation. I've literally got these ideas in my mind that I want to discuss with someone else, and I'm going to hear what they're saying. And that again leads back to just that curiosity. Let that curiosity come through. Have a balance with things, and everything will figure itself out for sure.
Well, that's the thing. I often feel when I'm having these conversations, a little bit of anxiety actually comes up because I realise I'm not as well read as you. Like, I've not read these books. And because of that, there's sort of like a form of anxiety that actually comes out, but it shortly goes away after about 10 seconds for some odd reason. I don't know why.
I think it's because you trust, like, once you start talking, you realise you know what you're talking about. And this is the power of, like, I always tell people to, like, record mini podcasts. So, like, even if it's just you by yourself, pick a subject and talk for like 10 minutes straight. And what you'll realize is you have to, like, formulate an articulation around ideas. So you've got all these ideas in your mind, and, like, you never get to portray them because you don't often have these conversations. But if you just sit there in front of a microphone and talk about a subject for 10 minutes, you force yourself to the realization of how little you understand the topic or how much you do. And you, like, formulate
how you can still
and you can,
like, for
it's
me,
about communication in a comprehensive way.
Exactly. Like, for me, I'm not a big reader, to be honest with you. It's not where I gain most of my information from. I've read books, but I've not read loads of them, essentially. So for me, I'm very much a conversationalist. That's where I get ideas. That's where things come to me. It's through talking to people. And I find that through the videos I make, as soon as I start reading from a script, as soon as it starts becoming pre-prepared, as soon as I have to think about, like, I have to mention this, I have to mention that, then I feel I am no longer doing something that is effortless. I am no longer in that flow state. I am no longer truly talking about it in the way I want to talk about it. But when I talk about things in a conversational way, when I'm prepared to admit when it's flowing, like this right now, you realise that you've actually just spoken for about 30 seconds, and everything that you're saying actually sounds pretty correct.
Yeah, it's weird. It comes from a place that is not you. It really does. Like, the moment you try to think about it and, like, oh, it's coming across this way, that's when you get stuck in your head. Nah, like, it really is like, stop forcing things. I love that Wu Wei, don't think, do.
It's honestly, man, like, when I found out about that a couple of weeks ago, it changed me. I was like, stop forcing things. Stop being somebody you're not. Because whilst out here in Thailand, one of the things I discovered was, well, I knew about it, but really, like, came clear to me, was being authentic. And then combination of that with effortless action. It's like, I see so many people, and also I keep saying that. I see so many people. Wonder why I keep saying that line. Because I do. I see so many people constantly forcing work, constantly being like, okay, I need to work here, so I'm going to force myself to work 4-5 hours a day. I'm going to get my spreadsheets out and I'm going to do work. And okay, if that works for you, if that is your flow state, and if that is effortless, respect. But for everyone, it isn't. Like, I guarantee you, for 50%, if not more people, that's not your flow state. You are forcing yourself to do work. Whereas if the work that you do actually is you, if that makes sense, if it actually is in line with your values, your morals, actually your energy, then the work isn't even work anymore. It's just action.
Yeah, there's this idea called the Muse, and it's by a guy called Stephen Pressfield. The book's called The War of Art. It's really good, mate. And what he talks about is, like, you have to still sit down. So say if you're a writer, or say if you want to record YouTube videos or do this, he's like, sit down and do the work. Because what happens is, like, if you wait for inspiration to spike, it's never going to hit. But you have to sit down and force inspiration to come to you. And he says the muse is like, inspiration is this divine being outside of our own brain that comes to us when we sit down and do the work. So say if you've got to write a script your own from your YouTube, and like you're just waiting for the script to come, sometimes it comes and then sometimes it doesn't. But if you sit down in front of a laptop for 3 hours a day, 4 hours a day, but with the intention of, I'm going to like connect to the muse and I'm here to be a professional, that intention will come through you and that work will come out. And it's important for any creative to like, with any creative, you need to sit there. Yeah, journaling is important. You need to journal, really important.
You really do, because that's, as you're saying, that's where you access the muse. That's where you access this creativity more so. By simply doing it direct, you're not going to do that. But just by almost taking a pen and the paper and then just writing what your mind is thinking at the time, you're going to get to something that's far more authentically you than simply writing something, trying to write a script. It's all these different concepts, mate. Like I feel we're not really in a position to be talking about them like deeply because we do not know enough yet. But that's the beauty of it. We're finding out as we're talking about it.
Yeah, and you teach 3 steps behind as well. So there'll be people that listen to the podcast that maybe haven't gone down this path yet, that get lessons from us and they catch up. And then we listen to people who are 3 steps ahead of us. And then they listen to people that are 3 steps ahead of us. And you constantly like learning from people. But it's important to share your stuff. So Jerome, I think we should end the podcast there, lad.
Oh, thanks, man. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Mate, that was a really good conversation. Every time we chat, Jerome, I think it's always I find out a lot, and it seems to flow really nicely. I love the articulation of anxiety. I think the way we communicate authenticity. I think that was another really good conversation, mate.
Well, thank you, man. It's been a pleasure talking to you again. Hopefully next time we can talk about different things if you want to. But I'm happy to talk about the same topics we seem to flow very well with, and it's been an absolute pleasure having me on again, or you having me on, and I really appreciate it, Alex. We should when I'm back in the UK, we should meet up and go for a beer. I think at some point, I think we need to actually meet up in person. It'd be nice.
Yeah, for sure, Jerome. Right, cheers, Jerome, mate.
Be an absolute pleasure, man. Thank you, man.